Arceus is a god, like literally a god. Not just a god of the Pokemon world, but a god in the realist sense. When you're referring to the prima causa, or a being than which nothing greater can be conceived, or any other epithet that you could think of, you're actually referring to no god but Arceus. Now, before you close the video and or starting to type a lengthy paragraph of how silly I make myself look, ask yourself, what exactly qualifies something as a god? Have you done your due diligence, arguing for the existence of your god over any other god that you claim to be fictitious? Because I have. Hi, I'm Fuad and I make videos questioning the stories we take for granted. And today, I'd like to defend a proposition that sounds completely absurd, that Arceus may deserve the title of God far more than most people's version of God. Let's get philosophical. Although Arceus is often referred to as the god of the Pokemon world, interestingly, there is no strict canonical statement that explicitly defines it as god in a theological sense. Instead, its divinity is implied through fragments of lore, symbolism, and interpretation. Across Pokédex entries, Arceus is described as emerging from a primordial egg-like state before the universe existed, shaping or creating the world after its emergence, and in some accounts being responsible for all existence within that world. It is also described as forming reality with its 1,000 arms and acting as a guiding or protective presence over Pokemon. These elements look like exaggerations or the standard flavor text practice common in most Pokemon's Pokédex entries. But if you pay enough attention, they actually mirror characteristics that already exist in global religious systems. The image of a creator associated with light and order resembles Abrahamic traditions. The motif of multiple divine arms appears in figures like Avalokiteshvara in Buddhism. The idea of a cosmic egg preceding creation appears in Egyptian, Greek, Hindu, and other cosmologies. So instead of belonging to one tradition, Arceus looks more like an amalgamation of multiple divine archetypes layered into a single entity. This becomes even clearer when we look at its symbolic environment. The spear pillar associated with Arceus' creative act echoes Shinto creation mythology, particularly Izanagi and Izanami using the divine spear Amenu Nuboko to form the first land. Arceus' design reinforces this multi-layered symbolism. Its general form resembles the Qilin from Chinese mythology, a creature associated with cosmic change or the arrival of significant figures. The ring on its back resembles halos used in religious iconography or cyclical cosmological symbols like the Dharma Chakra or the Bhava Chakra. Even its signature move, Judgment, reinforces the idea of moral authority, something closer to divine evaluation than ordinary combat mechanics. The name Arceus itself feels loaded, potentially connected to arche, meaning origin or principle, and deus, meaning God, reinforcing themes of origin, authority, and transcendence. So, at this stage, philosophically speaking, Arceus is not a singular theological idea, but a synthesis of divine traits drawn from multiple cultural systems. But then the question becomes, what kind of God this entity is supposed to be? In the movie Arceus and the Jewel of Life, Arceus is shown protecting the planet from a meteor impact, but the act significantly drains its power. It is also shown becoming angry after being betrayed by humans it once trusted. Taken literally, this introduces tension with classical theological expectations. How come a being associated with creation is still depicted as capable of losing strength, emotionally reactive, and vulnerable to deception? This seems incompatible with the classical Abrahamic model of God, which is usually defined through omnipotence, omniscience, and moral perfection. So, under strict classical theism, the conclusion seems simple. Arceus does not qualify as a god in the tri-omni sense. But is it though? There are a few possible responses. One is to reject that movie as non-canonical, preserving a consistent divine model. This resembles how real theological traditions separate orthodoxy from heresy, just like what Irenaeus and or Constantine in his Council of Nicaea did, where authority determines what counts as legitimate doctrine. Another option is more interesting, adding new canon. In the 2019 video game Pokémon Legends Arceus, it is revealed that Arceus exists beyond space and time, appearing to humans only as a limited manifestation of a different reality. The form encountered in the world is not the totality of Arceus, but only an intelligible fragment of something fundamentally incomprehensible. It is also implied that Arceus can project aspects of itself into the world, meaning what interacts with reality is only a partial expression rather than the full being. If this is accepted, then the apparent contradictions disappear. The emotional and fallible Arceus belong only to the projected entity, not the ontologically distinct and transcendent one. At this point, you're probably thinking that I've completely lost my mind. And that's fair. For the last 3 to 4 minutes, I've been comparing a Pokémon to some of the most important religious concepts in human history. But despite all of that, I haven't actually done the one thing theologians are supposed to do. I haven't argued that Arceus exists. I only argued that Arceus looks suspiciously godlike, characteristically and lore-wise. But obviously, that's not enough. After all, a character can possess every divine attributes imaginable and still remain fictional. So, if I really wanted to take this idea seriously, if I genuinely wanted to argue that Arceus deserves the title of a real god, then I will need something more than mythology. I will need philosophy, specifically philosophical argument for the godly existence of Arceus. And yeah, there will be a lot of Anselmian idea being presented here. Premise 1. Arceus' attributes are practically an amalgamation of many major deities' attributes. Premise 2. It's better for a deity to have all the attributes of all major deities than to have only attributes of one deity alone. Premise 3. Per Anselm's premise, a being that which no greater can be conceived, the fact that we can conceive a god better than any major gods, which is Arceus per premise 2, means that all the major gods are not maximally great. Arceus is. Conclusion, Arceus is the being which no greater can be conceived. Now, does this argument prove that Arceus exists? Of course not. At least, probably not. But you can't deny that the logic checks out and the premises are reasonable enough to be considered valid, right? Now, if I were completely serious, I could push this argument one step further. I could say that the Arceus appearing in Pokémon is merely a fictional representation of a real metaphysical entity. That the game designers unknowingly concentrated a genuine divine being by combining the same attributes of the real-world gods. That every religion was actually inheriting only some of the divine characteristics, and the combination of it all, unbeknownst to anybody, happened to be exactly like Arceus, metaphysically, theologically, and literally. Okay, do I believe that? No. Well, probably not. Am I making things up? Absolutely. But here's the interesting part. How much of this am I making up? Because if I replace the word Arceus with God, Allah, or Yahweh, will the argument start sounding favorable? Many famous theological arguments operate in pretty much the similar ways. Philosophers such as Anselm begin with the concept of the greatest conceivable being and reason from that concept towards conclusion about reality. But that's a cliched problem, an exhausted dilemma of the Western framework of seeing God. There is, however, a deeper and severely overlooked problem. Notice what happened throughout this entire discussion. In order to determine whether Arceus qualifies as a god, I repeatedly appealed to concepts like omnipotence, maximal greatness, perfection, necessity, transcendence, and ultimate causation. I treated these as if they were the obvious criteria by which any deity should be evaluated. But why? Why should a god be maximally powerful rather than maximally, wise? Why should divinity be singular rather than many? Why should a god exist outside reality rather than emerge from within it? And why should greatness itself be the measure of divinity? These assumptions feel self-evident only because many of us inherit a philosophical tradition that has spent centuries refining a very particular image of God. An image shaped by Plato, Christian theology, medieval scholasticism, and later philosophy of religion. Over time, these frameworks become so influential that it becomes the only conception of divinity. And once that image becomes the default, other conceptions begin to look incomplete, primitive, or even irrational. But obviously, outside that framework, divinity comes with many shapes and sizes. In many traditions, gods are not maximally great beings. They are relational beings. They occupy cosmological natural spaces, and they exist within reality rather than beyond it. They can be multiple, contradictory, limited, or even vulnerable. From that perspective, asking whether a deity is omnipotent may be like asking whether democracy is blue. The question assumes a framework the concept was never meant to satisfy. And perhaps that is why Arceus is such a useful example. So where does this leave us? Arceus is not a proof of God, and it was never meant to be. Arceus is more of a warning towards our personal bias, our unwarranted confidence, and our overlooked assumption about reality that's shaped by a specific culture rather than accepted worldwide as the truth. This is not to say that we're wrong, because we could definitely be right. But until then, we are back into square one. So I guess I would like to give you guys a challenge. I'd like you to prove me wrong, not by telling me that Arceus is fictional. I already know that. But by showing me why the standards you use to dismiss Arceus as a god should be accepted in the first place. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the discussion hall, and please be courteous there.